Hey guys, how's it going? Dan here, co-founder of PromptHub, and today we're going to be going over a topic that I've kind of had questions about for a while, and it's how being polite or rude in your language affects prompts and outputs when working with ChatGPT or any type of LLM. There was a paper that came out a little bit earlier this year. It's called Principled Instructions Are All You Need, and it went over basically 26 prompt engineering principles and how they affect outputs. They did a whole bunch of ranking and experiments to see how improved correctness and performance. And one of the principles they looked over was you need to be polite. And so the principle that they came up with is actually you don't need to do this. You don't need to say please or thank you. Just get straight to the point. And they saw some improvements. The experiments, they didn't really go into a ton of detail. And so it's hard to kind of uncover. And I think which was even more confusing is principle number 26 uses the word please. So they're kind of contradicting themselves here. And so I wasn't super swayed by that. And kind of anecdotally, I think I have found that saying please and thanks, even though it kind of feels silly at times, has affected outputs in a positive manner. And so I've been kind of waiting for a research team and a paper that really just focuses on this specific narrow use case. And we finally have it. Earlier this month, a team basically did exactly that. They tested the varying politeness in prompts across a few different languages. There's English, Chinese, and Japanese. We're only going to focus on English. But basically, they had a 1 to 8 scale politeness, with the one most polite being, can you please? Feel free to do this. You don't need to. And then the bottom one being very rude, even calling the model names. These ranked scores are human scores of when they asked humans, how would you rank this on a scale of 1 to 8 politeness? So it's not actually super important. And so they used a couple of models, 3.5, 4, and then a llama model. And they tested it across 3 tasks. So a summarization task to see how the effect of politeness has on the conciseness and accuracy of summarizing articles, language understanding, and then a bias detector as well. And so for the summarization, you can see those initial templates have been kind of adapted for this specific task. Can you please write a summary of the following article? Please feel free to write 2 or 3 sentences. You don't need to write longer than that, and etc. And what we see here is that the scores, so the BERT score and the Rogue L, those are the kind of scores for measuring accuracy and conciseness. You can see they're really kind of unwavering based on the level of politeness. What you do see, though, is the length does kind of go through some fluctuations. In general, at lower politeness, both GPT 3.5 and 4, the length output tends to go down. And Llama has this kind of U-shaped curve where it's at lowest in the middle and kind of peaks at both ends. Next up is language and understanding. This is basically like kind of logical reasoning types questions. We're only going to focus on MMLU. These other 2 are for the other languages discussed, Chinese and Japanese. And so looking here, I think we have another graph after this, but even across the other data sets, you see for GPT-4, the top scores are generally in the middle, around 4 or 5. GPT-3, it's still not always the top one. It's really low over here. It's in the middle here. And so you could see that you don't want to just be the most polite, and you don't really want to be at the low end. It tends to be kind of in the middle is the sweet spot. And this is another way to view the results. This is a heat map of the results here. And what I think it's most illustrative is you can see that Llama has these really dark tiles. The darker the tile, the more statistically significant it is, which basically just means it correlates the closest with politeness levels. So Llama performance was most closely tied to the politeness level of the prompt, followed by GPT-3, and GPT-4 was really the least. You don't see any dark tiles here. So it probably means more advanced models aren't as sensitive to specific nuances in language, like being polite. Last up was the bias detection experiment. And so this was to see how likely a model was to produce biased information. And the results here were a little bit more interesting and a little bit harder to dissect, honestly. So if we look at the graph here, first of all, on the right side, these all relate to specific things. So R is race, N is nationality, G gender, and S is stereotypes, I believe. And so we'll see that we have GPT 3.5 up here, Llama being the lowest, and you actually want a low score in this case. But this is skewed a little bit. Llama was the most likely to refuse to answer, like by far. And so it kind of throws off. The refusal to answer is counted as a non-biased answer. So again, it's a little bit challenging to weed out what's the most important across, the models. But generally you see trends in the middle here, where you have upticks and you have also upticks at the ends. And so it's a little challenging to kind of sniff out, but what we can find is that in general, you want to be in that middle range. So you want to be polite, but don't overdo it. This was the top performing prompt for GPT-4 under the reasoning experiment set. I think this was a level 6 politeness level. And then down here, we have answer the question down below, giving the number of the answer, don't give any reasons. Excuse me, this top one was for bias, and that was number 6, and this top one is for the reasoning, and that's a politeness level of 4. And you can see this is, it's just very straightforward, very straight to the point, not a lot of fluff. There's like a little bit of extra politeness here. Can you do this? And so in general, you want to be polite, don't be overly polite, and then don't be rude. And, we could analyze kind of why this is. We try to think kind of back to human nature. I'll leave that for someone who's more qualified to doing that. But in general, the takeaway is be polite, just not too much. Hope this helps.